Welcome back, everyone, to Ed Up Edge, where we discuss all things career education, leadership, and life hacks. Hear from some of the most amazing and insightful guests in higher education. Let's go. Welcome back, everyone, to Ed Up Edge, where we talk about all things career education, leadership, and life hacks. Today, we're talking about one of my favorite topics, which is leadership. And I am thrilled to be joined by Dr. Karen Hills, a renowned leadership strategist, global keynote speaker, author with over 30 years of experience in transforming high performing professionals into impactful leaders. Keyword here is impactful. There's so many people who are looking to get into a leadership role, but they don't understand what leadership is. And it is a critical problem in the workplace. So of course I had to bring on an expert, Dr. Karen Hills. So welcome, Dr. Hills.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm excited about the conversation.
Me too. So tell us a little bit about your background and what inspired you to focus in leadership.
Absolutely. So my background is very diverse. I have been in senior leadership for about 15 years. I have a career that has spanned about 30 years. I've worked in 6 different industries, but I started off at the front line, those entry level positions, and I've worked my way up, worked through the politics, worked through the getting additional experience, the challenging supervisors, all the way up to the senior leadership role. And I've kind of lingered here for about 15 years. The 6 industries I've worked in has been nonprofit, for-profit, governmental, museums, retail industry, tax industry as well, and education. And so because of those different industries, I have a very diverse background. And how I got into leadership per se was I had a succession of 3 very interesting bosses. Let's just say it like that. And I thought I could do it differently.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I could do it with integrity and honesty, as long as I had the technical skills. And so once I decided, hey, I think I want to be the top role, because you have more authority to make change with your workforce when you're at the top role, then I set out to get a mentor. And I found that mentor on LinkedIn. She charged me $350 an hour. And this was 16 years ago. So your girl wasn't rolling like that 16 years ago. And so I negotiated, the person that I am, I negotiated for 1 hour a month. And she mentored me for $350 a month and worked with me for over a year, 1 hour a month. She didn't cut me off at the 60 minutes. And after working with her, I was invited to apply for a senior leadership position. And I went through the 4-month process, and I've been in senior leadership ever since then. And so her mentorship really helped propel and help me identify my unique sauce to other people with similar education and similar roles. And my thing is that I have a knack for numbers, and I can create numbers when numbers don't exist. And so data analytics is my thing, is my juice. And so that's how I got into leadership.
That is awesome. I love that you were able to invest in yourself. And I think that's lacking when we think of goals and aspirations and what we want to achieve. Some people are just not willing to invest in themselves and then make that move in order to grow.
Absolutely.
But yet still we want the outcome.
Absolutely. And you have so much stuff on social media now telling you can get it for free, and you can get it for free tomorrow. And that is just not true at all. It is some work that is involved for any leadership position. And so you have to kind of do your time as well as get the education and experience that you need.
Absolutely. So what are the biggest challenges, professionally, that we face transitioning from high performing individual contributors to impactful leaders? What would you say?
I would say some of the biggest challenges is just understanding the fact that not all practitioners are leaders of people. And what I mean by that is there takes a certain level of skills, a battery of skills that is associated with dealing with a multi-generational workforce that may be in different locations. Some of them may be your traditional office, some of them may be remote, working from home, and all different levels, from management to supervisory to frontline to your first year professional. There is a lot of skills that are associated with leading of people that people who are promoting those future leaders aren't testing for, to ensure that they have those skills that are associated with mentoring, training, leading by example, operating with integrity. A lot of times the high performers have the technical skills, so they are the
There you
practitioners,
go.
but there is no testing of the leading of people, which is critical because you are more vulnerable the higher up you go up the chain. And so you're no longer doing the work, your people are doing the work. And so if they can't get guidance, leadership, direction, education, and correction from you, then they're not going to succeed and you're not going to succeed. And so I think one of the biggest challenges is that we promote high level practitioners without testing them for their competencies of leading people.
Wow. Okay, so being in the for-profit sector, okay, of higher education, when it comes to admissions, a lot of times, we focus on, the outcomes, right?
Mhm.
Enrollments, numbers. And I found in my career that a lot of leaders, they go left when they're promoting high performing advisors. Okay, we call them glorified reps, right? So it's like they think because they're the top performer, it's obvious that I'm going to be the next enrollment leader. And that's not true, because sometimes those top performers, they don't understand that, okay, I'm in my own box performing, so I'm the best version of myself in this position. But now when you're leading a team, you have to be able to inspire those people to perform. And I always say a true leader is someone who has a team of people who show up because they want to, not because they absolutely need to, because they need the check, I need to survive. And it's a big problem in higher education because they don't know how to drive productivity for the team. They get promoted and they're still the top performer, but at the same time, the team is dwindling and falling apart.
Absolutely, because they are operating more under transactional competencies,
Mm,
than transformational. Transformational leadership is where you can motivate individuals. There's an innate feeling that that individual has to complete whatever it is that is before them, that assignment. It's not transactional. There's not an immediate exchange of money, additional assignments, or promotions. And that kind of transformative encouragement that leaders give individuals is what help them come in every day and do their best, even when you aren't dangling something for them to
mm-hmm,
do their best. And so a lot of times, even our high performers are generally rewarded a lot of times with promotions and money and bonuses and all of those things.
mm-hmm.
So they're used to operating under that transactional environment. But when you move up to leadership, sometimes you don't have those tools. Sometimes you don't have the money to dangle a promotion or to give additional money, but you still need that high performing practitioner to still perform and enjoy performing, because you get more productivity from employees who
Exactly.
enjoy what they're doing as opposed to employees who look at a job as a transactional relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
so those things have to be explained, in terms of others have to explain to your up and coming leaders the value of being a transformational leader as opposed to a transactional leader, the value of having people find out, what is my why? What is my
Mm,
why to doing this particular thing? Sometimes a lot of jobs aren't high paying jobs. People stay in them for decades is because they believe in the purpose, the vision, and the mission. And so
absolutely.
also, if your employees don't know what their why is, then you can't help motivate them through their why. You can't dangle their why in front of them because the employee doesn't know what their why is. So I think it requires a little bit more vetting for those that
Mm-hmm.
we are looking to promote, which means there's a little bit we need to have we need to know those that we promote. It just can't be that paper review where they look good on paper. You need
Mm-hmm.
to really know so that you can do a personal SWOT analysis of each candidate that you're looking. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What are their opportunities and their threats? And then look at what the team has to offer just to make sure that they are complementary so that they can lead that team.
Exactly. I think a lot of this is purpose driven too. It's funny because I was actually working with a team a couple of weeks ago, and I was asking the team members, I said, so what is your purpose? What keeps you here those days where you're not talking to anyone? You're making $100. Nobody's answering the phone. Students are rude. There's no activity. And one of them said, well, I come every day because this is my job and this is what I'm supposed to do. And I'm like, but it has to be deeper than that, because what's going to keep you anchored those days where there is nothing going on? It's like when you want to lose weight. Okay, are you losing weight because you want to be the next top model? But then if a doctor says you have to lose weight because you only have 2 more weeks to live, it
Yes,
changes everything.
yes,
So I
yes,
was like, well, what about your family or your kids? And he goes, I guess that's a problem.
yes. And
You
that
got to make sure
person
you have the
won't
right
be there.
team.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they won't be there 10 years from now. They won't be there at all because the next position that comes along that pay $101, they're
Gone.
gone.
Oh man. And so what are some of the what key skills do you think leaders need in the modern workplace?
So you have to be there's an awareness of your industry that I don't think that people get comfortable in their positions that they um, don't have. And what I mean by that is you need to know what are the top programs that are operating in your industry. If your organization is not using them, then you need to at least bring it to the table as to
Mhm.
the pros and cons of why your institution should be using them. You need to know what are the top methodologies that people are using in leading people. What is
Mhm.
the, because um, there's nothing new in leading people, but there are new ways to approach new generation. We have
Yes.
5 generations working in the workforce now, and they all are motivated differently. And so you need to know how to motivate each of those generations while they're working as a team. And you need to be able to talk to them and based off of what motivates them and be able to provide the resources that are needed for those things that motivate them. And so I think an awareness of your industry, of what is the latest and greatest and the needs of people who are working in your particular workspace, your particular industry. What are the recent software programs that are being used? I'm a data queen, so I'd be remiss if I didn't mention numbers. And I believe in leading with numbers because numbers
Mhm.
do not have emotion. Numbers can be verified and
Yep.
validated and repeated. And so data analytics is huge. When I'm talking to my consultant clients about what are your numbers, how much money have you managed in terms of budgeting if you want to get into leadership? How many people have you managed in terms of multi-level, multi-location? Because if you want to get in leadership, not all of your people are going to be sitting in the same office as you. The higher up you go,
Mhm.
the more spread out your people are. And
That's
it's going
true.
to require different resources and tools for you to use to stay on their performance, to be able to timely address issues. Again, you are most vulnerable the higher up you go. And so how do you keep in touch with what your employees is doing in a timely way? Through reports, through communication, and through on-site visits.
I love that. I think what also happens with leadership is you have people who get into to a leadership role and they're mirroring what their previous leader was doing, right? Without really understanding different leadership styles and theories. So you just try to adapt what you saw, but that's not your personality. So now it doesn't even come off, organic, and it's not coming off authentic. And your team is looking at you like, who are you? This is not even who you are. And it doesn't even feel comfortable for you because you have to understand who you are as an individual.
Absolutely. And I think we
What?
all take from people who have led us,
Mm-hmm.
who are people who have led us. So, but how you find out who you are authentically is through your experience and education. So
Exactly.
you have to expose yourself to others so that you can kind of figure out who you are. Now it sounds crazy because you have to look externally,
Uh-huh.
because seeing things done in different ways will determine how you want to do things and how you most feel comfortable doing things. So seeing leaders operate with different leadership styles will help you determine what is your style, that you feel comfortable employing, because you're going to be employing it with your mannerisms, with your morals, with
Exactly.
with your ethics. And so, but you have to be exposed to that. So that's why it's important to have education and multiple experience. I know the days of our grandparents and great grandparents working for one company for 20 and 30 years, those days are pretty much gone. But
Yeah.
those type of employments were also disadvantages, because when you only work for one employer, you only know one way of doing things. That is the way of that employer. And so as a leader, you are most valuable when you have multiple ways to bring to the table of how things are being done. For instance, when I was in leadership at Home Depot, I was in kind of best friends with my counterpart at Lowe's, because I wanted to know what Lowe's was doing. And we always build right across the street from Lowe's. If you ever go anywhere, Home Depot and Lowe's are always down the
That
street.
is true.
And so you have to know what your counterparts are doing, what your competitors are doing, so that you can figure out what your secret sauce is in dealing with your particular people. So I think what happens is that people don't branch out enough to find out the various ways that you can do leadership, leading processes, leading people, leading change, using systems, so that they can find who they authentically are and match that with the industry that they work in.
Interesting. Do you feel that it's because a lot of leaders come with egos and they
Well,
feel as if they know everything? So it's like, I don't need to look outside because I was hired because I already know this role like the back of my hand.
yeah, that ego won't take you but so far in leadership. Yes, now we all have egos, we do, but we also should be able to realize that what we now know is only going to take us so far. When you see other people trying new and tested things that you are unaware of because you haven't kept up with what's going on in the market, then you know it is your turn to go out there, find a mentor, find a coach, get education, take a class or something, so that you can find out what's going on in your market, because that's going to keep you competitiveness. The two roles of leadership is competitiveness and sustainability. So we plan for 3 to 5 years down the road, but competitiveness means that I know what my competitors are doing. I have bought their products and services so that I can dissect them when I get home. I can look at what their customer service is, what their product quality is. And a lot of people don't even shop their competitors. If they're in leadership in one position, they wouldn't dare buy something from a competitor. But how are you going to know the quality of the service or the product if you don't purchase it, if you don't go through that experience? And so also, because of online, people forget that our competitors are online. And so you need to know who your competitors are, brick and mortar and virtual, because nowadays people can pretty much get everything online as well. I mean, you can get stuff from Amazon the same day, which I'm still trying to figure out how they do that. But certain things,
because I haven't experienced it yet.
certain things that you can buy from them, you can get within 4 hours. But that is someone who has a temperature check on what their customer needs are. And as leaders, we need to have an ongoing assessment of what do our staff, our employees need and require from us, and need to make sure that we have those skills available.
Absolutely. So now you bring up a really good point. So let's talk about emotional intelligence and adaptability in leadership. First off, break down what emotional intelligence is for our audience.
Yes, well, emotional intelligence is one, your ability to recognize your impact on others, as well as their impact on you. And so we're talking about interpersonal impact, because interpersonal impact shows out in the workplace, shows out between how we deal with one another, building rapport between each other personally. And a lot of times we act, talk, do things, and are oblivious to the row of dead bodies that you just left in the road behind something that you said or done. And that is a lack of emotional intelligence, because you need to have a situational awareness of what your actions bring to any given situation, whether it's a conversation, whether it's a workplace. And that is having awareness of impact of words, impact of actions, impact of body language. And a lot of people just don't, they just communicate without having that awareness. And so they can't even address
Mm-hmm.
the impact of it because they are unaware of it. And so being aware, it's awareness of yourself and what you say and do, as well as what others say and do that cause you to act.
Understand. It's funny because it's like some leaders, they respond impulsively, right? Because they're not self-aware of their emotions. And I think some leaders show up feeling that they have to be perfect all of the time, right? They hide a lot of emotions too. But then you have the flip side where you have some leaders, they just say whatever comes to mind at any point in time. And there's no self-regulation, right? So
Yes,
it's like, put yourself in that person's shoes. If they said
absolutely.
that to you, how would you have felt walking out of that meeting?
Yes, and I love that term that you use, self-regulation, because I love that, because that's exactly what it is. You can't always say what you want to say or what you feel like you should say at that given moment, given the
Mm-hmm.
environment, given who you're talking to, and given the information that you have, because you may need to have some more information. And I
Yeah.
strongly do not believe in communicating in an emotionally charged way, where your words are emotionally charged, because sometimes people cannot even hear what you're saying because of the method that you chose to
Yeah.
communicate, whether it's your tone, or whether it is animation, because sometimes
Mm-hmm.
we talk with our hands, and some,
Mm-hmm.
you can't come at me with a loud voice and just looking like a traffic guard, and all that stuff. It's like, okay, get your stuff together. But yeah, we are, a lot of people are very unaware. And so I love that term you use, self-regulation, because that spot on is what it is. And the regulation is regulating yourself, as well as making sure that you don't be reactive in an adverse way to things that are being said to you.
Exactly, because that's the quickest way to actually lose trust with your
Oh,
team.
absolutely. Absolutely.
When I first became a leader in higher education almost 2 decades ago, I used to look at what my director was doing at the time, how he responded to the team, and their response to him. So it took a lot of sitting back and really analyzing, okay, that didn't work. Okay. But that actually got a really good response. And I was able to take those into those attributes into my very first role.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a trial and error. Okay, I see what doesn't work in this type of team. Let me tweak this, but let me take this. But how do you think that businesses can better support this type of transition with
Um,
employees?
internal training and modeling. I think we
Mm.
do a lot of training absence the modeling. And what do I mean by modeling? Meaning that people truly need to operate that way. A lot of times, employers send us to all these training classes. They bring people in to talk to us, and then we have a supervisor who's off the chain doing everything different than what they say you should do in training. And so,
Mhm.
training on being aware of yourself, training on triggers. What are your triggers? Identifying your
Mm.
triggers, training on getting to know your workforce so that you can know what their triggers are, so that you can proactively already address and prevent those type of triggers. And so I think training coupled with modeling, having leaders model those things that are positive, those things that are ensuring that they are employing self-regulation, as you mentioned, those things that are showing that they have awareness of their team, what their team is looking for, what their team need, how their team may respond. So how they talk, how they show their nonverbals, the timing of conversations is critical, because you
Mhm.
just because you want to say something don't mean it's the right time to
Right
say
time.
things.
Mhm.
Because staff is always looking, and staff will pick up on that, and they
Mhm.
will pick up and adopt that. Many times they will adopt that. And so teams can better support the transition from management to leadership by making sure that they train their workforce, but making sure their existing leadership model what they are training, so that employees come up in a healthy environment that is modeling acceptable positive behavior.
That's interesting. So you mentioned triggers. So I know on some teams, right? some personnel are triggers for leaders,
Yes.
which is a problem. How would you actually address that if you have one employee on your team who is your trigger? How would you go about that? Or
Yeah,
what
been
advice
there,
would you give?
been there, done that. I had
Uh-huh.
one employee who I have open door policy, so I leave my door open a lot.
Mhm.
And just because I leave my door open don't necessarily mean that you could walk in every 5 minutes. But I had one team member who would walk in to ask me things that he could have researched, and it was
Mm.
very bothersome to me. But after realizing that he was triggering me, and he was really triggering me, because as soon as I look up and saw it was him, I knew he was getting ready to ask me a question that he probably could have already
Mhm.
pulled a resource and got the answer to. Um, I checked myself when you talk about that self regulation, and I
Mhm.
realized that it was a lack of confidence on his part, even though he had the resource that he just wanted somebody in a supervisory level to say
Mm.
yay or nay. So it was more of a confidence for him. So I kind of flipped how I looked at it, realizing, hey, my whole attitude changed as soon as I look up from my desk and realize he's standing on the other side of my desk. And then so I worked on him about his confidence. I said, look, nobody's going to take you out back and drag you and beat you because find you making the wrong decision. It is okay. Use your resources, make a decision. I will stand behind you if you use the resources that we have out there and you make the decision. Now, if you make a decision and you don't use the resources, I might have a problem with it. But if you
Mhm.
use the information that is out there, it's okay. Even if it doesn't turn out okay, I got your back because you have utilized what we have in play for you to utilize. He just needed a co-signer on everything he did because he lacked confidence. So again, it's
Mm.
knowing your people, knowing their strengths, their weaknesses, their opportunities, and their threats. And his was, although he was a very good employee, he lacked the confidence to make an independent decision. So what does that mean? That means that he wasn't a good employee, because I need employees to work independently. It
Uh-huh.
also means that I could never consider him for a promotion because he couldn't even handle the load of working in his current position and making independent decisions. And so we talked, we worked through. I told him and allowed him the space to make decisions. Most of them
Mhm.
turned out okay. When they didn't turn out okay, we talked about why it didn't turn out okay. The world didn't stop when it didn't turn out okay. And so he was able to learn how to make independent decisions. But we all have situations where people kind of trigger us, and mine was just looking up and in his face, and it's like, okay,
Mhm.
how can I help you?
That's really great advice because I work with a lot of enrollment leaders, and a lot of times they're saying, "Oh my gosh, this team member, that team member get on my last nerve." Or you may have people who are just underperforming over and over, and they're getting really annoyed. So being able to really sit back and say, "Okay, what is it about this employee that really gets underneath my skin? Where did it go wrong? Is it a lack of information? Does this person really not understand the role because they're faltering in the same exact area every single class start?" I think that's going to help a lot if they could just sit back and analyze, okay, what is it about this employee? It may call for a conversation with that employee. And I find a lot of leaders, they're not having that one-on-one time
Yeah,
with
they're
those people to figure out what's the problem, what's the setback.
Yeah, a lot of leaders are conflict averse. They don't like, they try to lead through email and text. They don't like having conversations, which is
Yeah.
crazy. But when you were talking, I was thinking about, there's two situations that I look at when it comes to employee performance. It is skill, and then it's will. And so
Mhm.
skill means that skill means that they um have never something has changed in the work area, maybe a new process or something, and they have never achieved the productivity goals based on whatever has changed.
Mhm.
Willful is skill. Willful misconduct means that at one time they were able to achieve the deliverables, and now they are no longer achieving the deliverables and nothing has changed. So that means that there's something externally that has
Mm,
impacted their ability. And so when it comes to employee, because I don't keep people on my team that don't perform over and over again unless there is a skill situation. It can't be
mm,
willful, because if you were performing once and nothing has changed, then I need to make sure that you have the resources to address whatever has impacted you to not perform now because nothing has changed. But if it is a skillful situation, then let's look at the processes. Let's look at what has changed. The system has changed. Maybe this person, maybe we taught a new process in an audio way, like having them listen to something, when this person is a hands-on type person. So let's get you the skills that you need so that you can properly perform. But that also means that you never ever met the productivity goals. Because for me, once you meet the productivity goals, then you have shown me that you can perform based on the processes and the systems that we have. And now we need to address is more willful, what is impacting you externally. So, but I think it is a morale killer for you to have someone on your team and not address them who is not performing repeatedly, because it's not fair to the rest of your team.
interesting. So when it comes to the willfulness, sometimes that's what leads to quiet quitting, right? Because you have people who were once performing, nothing has changed. Now they're not performing, and we're not having those conversations. And this person, there's probably the culture that has changed or the lack of support. And now they stop performing and their performance just starts to get, least and least and least. And now all of a sudden you get that 2 weeks notice.
Yeah, well,
Now
it
they
could
take
be.
2 weeks notice.
It's so funny when I heard the term quiet quitting. I just laughed because you can only quiet quit for about a month with me. So,
Yeah.
because I know my employees, I talk to my employees, I know what you're doing, I touch base with you, I do temperature checks. And
Hmm.
so, if you have changed from what I know you, like you may be a very engaging employee, happy employee, or whatever, you have changed. Even if you're churning out your work, I'm on it.
Hmm.
I'm like, hey, I noticed that there's been some change in you. Do you need to take a day off, or want to
Hmm.
talk about it, or do I need to refer you to EAP, because I want the old you back. I want the happy you back. I miss your jokes. I miss this, that, and the other. You, again, you cannot be a laissez-faire manager of people. You cannot be hands off. You have to know your people, and that goes to knowing their mannerisms, knowing when someone who is
Yes.
generally engaged, who is not engaged, when someone who's generally an extrovert all of a sudden not saying anything. And if that go on for months and you don't address it, even if they are churning out their numbers, it's not always about productivity in the workplace. It is about a change in your employees, because you can view that as that they are not happy. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you caused them not to be happy, but
Hmm.
it will eventually spill over. If they're not happy at home, then they're coming to work as an unhappy being. You're not going to automatically make them happy, so something is going to happen at work where they're not happy. And so, yeah, you have to have that situational awareness of your employees and jump on it and question them when you just see a difference. And it's not always about productivity of work.
No. No. And you know what? Those are the best leaders. I remember when I used to work out of a campus, there were some employees where as soon as they walked through the door, depending on how they said hello to me,
Mm-hmm.
and they went into their office, I'm like, can you come see me, please? And as soon as they
Yep.
walk in, they're like, what happened? I'm like, no, I'm asking you what happened, because the way you said hello was a little off to me. And they're like, how do you do that?
Yes.
Because you know your team.
Yes, yes,
You know
absolutely. Absolutely. And
them.
they employees appreciate you.
Yeah.
Even if they aren't ready to talk about it, and they'll
Mhm.
just say, I got some personal stuff going on, but they appreciate the fact that you didn't allow them to just turn into a wallflower and
Yeah.
act like everything was a-okay, and they are truly different in the workplace.
Exactly. All right. So walk us through the AVP framework. Okay. So for those of you who do not know what the AVP framework is amplify your value. Okay. How does that help professionals stand out and lead effectively?
Yes, absolutely. So that is one of my trademark framework.
Mm-hmm.
And so it consists of 5 steps. First, you examine your experience and your education. Second, you determine what your next level is. Third, you close your gaps. Fourth, you create a blueprint. And 5, you plan to pivot. And so to give you an example of how individuals can actually use that to stand out, you have to be able to tie your performance to your organizational performance.
Mm.
For my industry, I worked in HR for 28 years, so I was not a revenue producing department. So how do I tie my workforce performance to the organizational goals when I don't have sales reports and all of that stuff? I actually created this framework because I worked in HR. It's like, look, you're not going to keep cutting my budget, so so you create a number. So give you an example of how I used it. I had a volunteer coordinator that I gained through an organization reorg, and I had never oversaw volunteer coordinators. She at the time that I got her, she had 800 volunteers that worked under her, 800 live people coming into work working under her. And so I would require all of my direct reports to report out what their department had done for the week. Well, my volunteer coordinator didn't report out. So the first couple of times after the reorg, I'm like, well, what is going on? She wouldn't report out. And so I did a one-on-one with her and said, yo,
Mm-hmm.
what's up? Why aren't you reporting out? Because that's the way I talk when my doors are closed. Like,
Uh-huh.
why don't you report out? And she said, because I don't have employees. I said, yeah, but you have 800 people who are coming in. I didn't say paid employees. You
Mm-hmm.
have 800 people in your department who you are overseeing, who are adding value to this organization. You have to know how to articulate the impact that you are making on this organization based on your 800-person workforce. She had
Exactly.
one of the largest departments than the paid employees. And
Wow.
so I said, look, I need you to be able to give me some type of quantifiable data, because I'm a data person, on what your workforce did for the last week. And so if you cannot, I ended the conversation with, if you cannot or do not know how to do that, let me know. She waited right up to the day before the next weekly meeting to shoot me an email and say, I don't know how to do that. And I said, game changer. Okay, no, not
Wow.
a problem, because now I can teach you. Now I can, well, it was never required of her in the past. So now
Okay.
I can teach you. So I said, well, look, we're going to do it this way. This is the easy way. I don't have time to send you to a class. You can't go get another degree or nothing like that. We're going to do it the easy way. US have state minimum wage and federal minimum wage. You have 800 people that are adding value. Even if we use the state minimum wage, which in Virginia is $12 an hour, we're going to multiply the number of hours that your workforce are working that week times $12 an hour to show the minimal value that they are providing to the organization. That's minimal
Wow.
because a lot of her workforce were retired executives who had
Mm-hmm.
decades of experience. So they're not operating at no minimum wage level, but
Mm-hmm.
this just to show her how to get a metrics. And so we put together the numbers. She pulled some timesheets, and really they were all working about 25 hours a week. We multiplied that times the week, times the month, to the year, over $12 million worth of talent her
Wow.
people were bringing to the table. And this chick is sitting in my meeting not saying anything. What? Her eyes opened up. Oh my goodness. She became a
Wow.
lover of just education then. And so then we tweaked it a little bit later about the different type of levels and positions that people were working. But just using the minimum wage, her workforce was contributing $12 million that we weren't paying for.
Wow.
She was one of the most powerful people at the table. So
You
she
didn't
was
know.
not amplifying her value. She's sitting there like, oh, I'm just a supervisor of volunteers. No, boo boo. You go to the table and tell them each week we're making this hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of talent we are contributing to the organizational goals. We're doing this monthly. We're doing this annually. This is how you talk. This is how you create a metrics, and you can sustain and validate the metrics based on the timesheets that they are working. And if you really want to get deep and add more value to it, then you can look at the positions that they're working. But you have to be able to amplify your value, because people will devalue you.
Absolutely.
If you don't. And what happened is that people appreciated her, but man, when she came out with those numbers that I taught her, all my other managers was like, "What?" They stepped up their game and how they presented their data based on what she did when she first reported out, because we also explained how she went about doing it. So, amplifying your value is being able to show how you can quantify your work and tie it to the organizational goals. Because we don't operate in silos, even though we operate in departments, but we are all have that indirectly dotted line to the organizational goals that we're all working towards. And you report it out. You report it out when you're speaking, you report it out in reports, because no one is going to keep up with what you're doing but you.
Exactly.
Your boss will, because they have to hold you accountable, but your boss don't keep up what you're doing every week. Your boss look at things maybe quarterly or monthly or something, depending on the type of reports that they have to do. But we don't have a time to keep up with everything you're doing. We do know and monitor you to make sure that you aren't dropping the ball. But if you want to show how powerful you are, you have to be able to articulate your metrics. And the metrics can be any movement up and down. You just have to be able to assign a number to it: increase, decrease, add on, and be able to explain that. And also you have to be able to, she first created those numbers so that she can build on. So those were her benchmarks, but you also have to have those ongoing numbers so that you can see the change.
Exactly.
So that is amplify your value, being able to articulate the value that you're adding in the workplace. And we can do that as workers. I keep up with, I have a work portfolio. Everybody else talking about resume. Yeah, I got a resume. I have a work portfolio. Every project I work on, who I work with on those projects, the level of the position that I work with, what the objectives were of that committee, and whether or not we achieved those results. I document all of that stuff, and so when people talk about, well, what you're doing, depending on what environment you're in and how much they want you to report out, I can tell you what I'm doing. I can tell you so much that you'll be sick of me talking about what I'm doing. Because if you don't keep up with your wins, nobody else is going to keep up. And you forget about them because you move on to the next one. You'll forget about it and move on to your next one.
Exactly. That is so critical, especially when it comes to my audience and admissions, because there's some leaders who they really don't like talking about numbers and metrics and conversions, but that's how these advisors are able to manage their expectations. Other than that, they're just going to come in every day and they're like, my goal is just to make as many calls as possible and efforts to speak to people and enroll students in class, right? That's what leads to burnout, because you're in a hamster wheel going absolutely nowhere. But working smarter, if you know your numbers and your conversions, you can say, all right, if I'm short in this area, maybe I need to work on my phone calls. If I have so many enrollments who are not starting class, what is that communication from the enrollment to the first day of class? Numbers and metrics is so important, yet still so many advisors and admissions, they don't understand them. And some were never taught.
Yes, that part. Yeah.
So interesting. So how can businesses ensure that their leadership development efforts directly contribute to organizational growth?
Well, you have to talk about what are your departmental goals and how do they tie into the organizational growth. So what are the organizational goals? There should at least, I don't know, once a quarter or at least twice a year, we'll say twice a year, where you have the organizational goals, the divisional goals, the department goals, depending on what levels you have, and what they are and how they tie into what it is that you're doing day to day. Because many times your everyday worker don't know how they tie. They just know, this is my task. This is what I'm doing. As a leader, you're leading the people who are doing the task. You're as a manager, you're managing the people who are doing the tasks. As a leader, you are the visionary. You're writing down the blueprint for they're going to follow 3 to 5 years down the road. That's another thing. Nobody talks about the conversion from manager to leader because people think they're synonyms. They're not. Managers are managers of actions. They're manager of tasks. They're talking about day to day, next week, maybe next month. As a leader, we're already planning 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road. We're working on a 5-year plan. So we're the visionaries. And in order to be the visionary, we need to keep up with not only what the organization is doing as a whole, but what are the other institutions? Like you're talking about working in higher ed. Okay, well, what are the other institutions doing? What are they working on? And is there a trend, what they're working on? Because if 2 or 3 or 4 of them are working on the same thing, then that's an industry trend. And if you're not working on that industry trend, then you're behind the 8 ball.
Like higher education as a whole. It's totally behind, out of the scope. What are some common pitfalls that companies face when investing in leadership development? Okay, because a lot of companies, they do not like to invest. Some of them adapt that, well, we've always done it this way. Yet still, they're just going down in that pitfall. And it's like, when are you going to realize that sometimes you need to make a change?
Well, I would say the common pitfall is having a reactive mindset against professional development instead of proactive. And what I mean by that is because of the work that needs to get done, one of the first things that gets sidetracked is training and professional development. You can't go to this conference. You can't take off this day to do this, that, and the other because we got all this work that needs to get done. But we need work to get done more efficiently, more competitively, but our staff can't find out what those tasks are and how to get it done that way because we want to allow them time away from the workforce to find out what those means are. And so we value today's tasks more than we value the future tasks when they should have the same value. And so we should have a more valuable approach to training and professional development, recognizing it's going to change how our workforce work in the future in a more efficient way, which is going to churn out more productivity. But I think the biggest thing is that we look at the task of today as the priority, and we devalue the organizational goals of the future, not recognizing we can't get there if we don't have the proper training.
That's so important. I've heard leaders say that they don't have time to train. We're too busy. We don't have time to train.
Yeah, that's when I'm writing on my little notepad doodling. When I hear somebody say that, it's like, Lord, I think I've been triggered. I can't even say anything.
That is hilarious. Well, I have one last question for you. Okay, based on your 30 years of experience, how has the leadership landscape evolved and what trends should organizations actually prepare for?
I think, well, I can talk about, well, let me break it down. So I was in HR for 28 years. So I'll give you an example of how that industry changed, and then I'll talk about leaders in general. So HR professionals came on the scene as admins. Now we are strategic business partners. The difference between the evolution is that it was once seen as that we didn't need to know how to understand the business to work for the business, to support the business. But life has shown, decades have shown, that the most successful professionals in HR need to understand the business so that they can be a good support for the business. Meaning, I understood departmental seasonality. I understood the metric goals that different departments were trying to reach. I understood the problems with the vendors that they were having. I understood why certain positions were taking forever to get filled because there was a very competitive work landscape out there. So you need to understand the business to understand your specialty. And so for when I move into general leadership, has evolved that you need to understand your people more so than the technical part. If you are a good people manager, you will get 200% from your people. Again, you only as good as your people are producing. So you can no longer be a technical only leader who lack people skills. You won't sustain yourself. Because you're leaving dead bodies in the road. You're talking to people any kind of way. You're not communicating with them. Some people are even avoiding communicating with them. Some people are, I call it this textology. Girl, I had a couple of managers think that it's appropriate to counsel somebody through a text. So just dealing with all of this type of stuff, and so as leaders, we need to know that the number one thing is people skills, then technical skills. So it kind of switched. And so that has been an evolution because, again, we have a history of promoting our highly proficient practitioners to leaders and then wondering why they aren't able to lead, which is what you had said some time back. It's because they lack the people skills. Well, now that has flipped. Now you need someone who is at the top of their A game with their people skills, and they can just be proficient in their technical skills, but because they are good at their people skills, their people are churning out work left and right. And so that is really what has evolved, the leverage between the competencies, the leading of people, the leading of change, and leading of processes in a leader. Now leading of people is top, and it's heavy because it has shown over the decades, the last 3 decades, at least for me, that those who are good at leading people get the productivity as a byproduct, but those who don't lead people well don't get any of the results. They lose their people. They don't have the byproduct. They're not achieving their goals. They're not making their numbers. And so leading the people is really the top competency of leaders now.
Wow, that's interesting, especially in higher ed, because I find that a lot of the top leaders, they were not the top performers. They were average performers. Yeah. But they had those people skills and they're able to actually drive that productivity because that trust is built between them and the people that they actually serve.
Yep. So, and that has to be explained. That has to be explained to the workforce as they're seeing these leaders being promoted, because they know who the top performers are. And it's like, how did she get the AVP position or the VP position? Well, it's not just about the proficiency and the technical skills. And that has to be explained to the workforce that you also have to master your people skills. And in this environment right now that we're in, if you're excellent at your people skills and you just proficient, you can't be inefficient, but if you're proficient in your technical skills, that may make you a better candidate because they need you to be able to empower and motivate more people based on the position that you have.
Exactly. That's why there's so many owners and hiring managers in the workforce who are like, you know what? I would prefer a student who is teachable, who's coachable, who I can train, who has a great attitude than someone who's a top performer in their class and they're horrible. They have the nastiest attitudes, the most negative mindset, and they're driving all my customers away.
Yes, absolutely. It's easier to train than retrain. It's easier to train than retrain.
There you go. You know, Dr. Hills, this was an amazing conversation. I love talking about leadership because, you know, we always hear those, we always see those posts. People do not leave bad companies. They leave bad bosses and leaders. And it's so true because your employees, they want to feel empowered. They want to feel as if you care and that you're just not another number on the workforce. And it's lacking in the workforce today. And I so much appreciate what you do. Okay, so thank you. Look, I have tons of notes here. Okay, tons of notes. But any final thoughts for our audience, Dr. Hills?
I just, if people want to keep up with me, I'm all about, to me, relationships are the best currency. And so if anybody in your, who are listening want to keep up with me, you have, if you happen to be looking at this, then you have the QR code behind me. So that's my LinkedIn QR code. But I will also send a code to be put in the podcast notes and allow and share a free downloadable template for people who are listening that has the 20 other things that you can ask for other than more money from your employer. And so
that's a
that
good
is
one.
my top downloadable that people, every time I try to change it out, people ask for it back. And so I will provide a link to that to be put in the podcast notes so that people can download that as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Hills. I'm sure that people are walking away with tons of value from this conversation. All right. So thank you so much once again for coming on Ed Up Edge.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everyone. I really hope that you enjoyed that episode. I have been working diligently to bring awareness to career schools. There's so much that they have to offer our students and our community. Every single role within the admissions process is critical, whether you're a part of the admissions team, financial aid, career services, academics, everyone deserves a voice. Admissions is the first point of contact for your school, so you want to ensure that you have a team who exudes confidence, passion, and a clear understanding of effective communication with our potential students. I totally understand the pain of missed class starts, low appointment and enrollment conversions, and this is why I created Next Level Admissions Training by Motivate with K.A.T. This platform is a step-by-step process, and it is going to train your new and tenured advisors in every single step of the enrollment process to ensure that our students are inspired and they're ready and prepared to start class. Admissions is not easy. It can be very challenging, but it's definitely worth it. So if you're ready to take your school to the next level, head on over to lessons.motivatewithkat.com and check out Next Level Admissions.